Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Planning and Control meeting. Before we go on, can I ask all of you to either turn your mobiles onto silent or turn them off completely? I see there's somebody remembered at the back. Do we have any apologies?
Chair, I've got apologies from Councillor Tracy Pearce.
Okay. Late items to be introduced by me, there are none. Declarations of interest. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. Just item number 5. I'm aware of this application. It's in my ward. However, I haven't personally been dealing with residents' queries on this one. My fellow councillors have, but I am approaching this with an open mind as always.
Is that okay, Stephen? Right. Well, we'll let you off, Matthew. Minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of October. Sorry. Right, okay. Minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of October. Seconder. Thank you. Minutes of the meeting of the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, which was held on the 2nd of September. Seconder.
So I've note them. I'm just interested to know why we haven't got the follow-on minutes for the Conservation Area Advisory Committee, because there's been another meeting since then, isn't there?
Stephen.
Oh,
It's okay. Chair, last time I checked, I think it's because there's not been another one since, so those minutes haven't been signed off.
Okay. With that in mind, would somebody like to move them? Seconder. Thank you. Item number 6, appeal decisions. I believe Ian's going to tell us about this.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening. I just want to report tonight, Chair, at 87 Morley Road, which the proposal was demolition of a dwelling house and erection of 6 dwelling houses. The decision was determined under delegated powers earlier this year. Permission was refused on the grounds of the detrimental impact of the proposal on the prevailing character of the area, the dominance and inadequacy of frontage car parking, and the impact of the proposal on protected trees. The inspector duly considered these issues and agreed with our position, and the concluding remarks in paragraph 20 of the decision letter are as follows. The proposal would result in significant harm to the character and appearance of the area, and also has the potential to result in inconvenience for road users and pedestrians on Brookfield Avenue. In these regards, the proposals would conflict with the development plan when taken as a whole, and there are no material considerations that indicate the decision should be made other than in accordance with the development plan. Therefore, for the reasons given, I conclude that the appeal should not succeed. So, a useful decision, Chair, and one which goes some way to support our position when we're dealing with applications that have got tight parking arrangements, and there weren't any highway safety issues that were brought to the fore, but just the general inadequacy of the parking arrangement at the front of those dwellings. So a good result, Chair, and I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. That's a good result. Actually, we could do with more sort of these going in our favour, because at the end of the day, it may not be a highway issue, but it could be a safety issue for the people sort of in that particular location in terms of the house. Anybody got any questions for Ian? No? Thank you. Number 7, development control performance, quarterly July till September. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nothing particularly, but I would refer to part 10.1 on health and safety, and just for members to note that individual officers continue to carry high caseloads, and earlier in the summer we appointed somebody to assist a senior planning officer who was recruited middle of the year, and he's since handed in his notice, which is unfortunate. So It does have an impact on the rest of the team, of course. They're carrying high caseloads, as I say. And also, of course, we're not just the people in the planning team and the wider planning team, but other colleagues, highways, development control, traffic and transportation, environmental protection. All these people have capacity issues. So just so there's some context for the metrics in the report. I'd also say something that we don't readily reflect in the report is the fact that we do have some very large applications that do absorb lots of officer time. Things like the Snellsmore Grange application, which is on the agenda tonight, Infinity Park proposals, the Ocore scheme, the new Smart Park scheme down at the former Selland East site. So these do absorb lots of officer time, and it's often not reflected in the metrics, and sometimes we have a knock-on effect. We're concentrating on those projects, or certain officers are, and it has an impact on the rest of the caseload. So sometimes it's a very delicate balance, and we are dealing with a small team essentially. But on a positive note, we do have a new enforcement and compliance officer commencing on her employment on Monday. So what I'll probably do is bring her to the either December or January meeting. She's got plenty of experience, comes from Ashfield District Council, so not too far away, got experience in public inquiries, injunctions, whole host of enforcement background on a CV. So I shall introduce her when she arrives, Chair, and hopefully we can tackle some of those thorny enforcement issues that we've got on our books. So a good note to end off with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I mean, we all appreciate it, I'm sure, that in these sort of unprecedented times, the amount of work that's involved with some maybe being off work and what have you, but these applications are large. They do require a lot of attention from officers, and I think as elected members, me included, we should take that into consideration when we're making inquiries on behalf of ward residents. So, but well done anyway, and let's hope the new enforcement officer stays with us for a long while before we sort of get used to her. By the time we get used to her, I hope she doesn't leave. But thank you for that. Anybody got any questions? No? Councillor Kerr?
Yes, thank you. And this is a question of principle rather than specific here. That under the 7.1, we have a comment about the situation regarding financial and value for money issues. And there would also be similar implications on climate implications and possibly legal implications, because we are working in a legal environment, and if we are alert to climate implications, then we may be negotiating on those as well. If we're not, if we do it in a timely manner. So I'm just thinking that maybe we could just have those reflected in future reports of this nature.
Would that be possible, Ian, Stephen?
Yes, we can do that, Chair. Yeah, it's something. I mean, in terms of, there are emerging responsibilities under the Environment Bill, so the Environment Act, sorry. So, rolling forward, we'll be talking to partners about dealing with in the future biodiversity net gain and the implications for that in decision making. So, and with all climate change responsibilities, we're looking at. As part of the overall assessment of applications, it broadens the sphere of applications and the role of other officers. So again, it expands the application process and brings in other colleagues. So it is another issue to take on board. But yeah, I'll try and reflect that in the next few reports, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Ian.
you.
Is that okay, Councillor Kerr? Yeah. Okay, moving on to Item 8, which is applications to be considered tonight, and the first one is on your papers, pages 1 to 5, 116 Boroughfield Road, and to tell us about that is Ian.
You'll be pleased to know, Chair, I have nothing to add. It's just been reported because Councillor Williams is the applicant, and that's procedure.
I take it nobody has anything to add. Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation then? That's carried.
11.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We've circulated a late item from the objector highlighting the impact of the proposal, or their concerns about the impact of the proposal on their property. That's been circulated. Photographs are included in that. This is also brought to committee as a result of comments from Councillor Skelton. So we've got 2 speakers, Chair. But I've got nothing else to add to the main body of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mr. and Mrs. Savage. You have 3 minutes.
Chair and members, thank you for allowing me to address you. I'm sure members will have reflected on our written submissions. We believe the proposal does not satisfactorily meet the requirements of policies H16 and GD5. The proposal would have a significant adverse effect on our property in terms of height, mass, overshadowing and proximity, seriously affecting our right to light where the orientation of the extension cuts in front of ours. Because of the orientation of the 2 bungalows, the proposal will be 3 to 4 meters high, at least 2 to 3 meters in length, directly in front of our nearest window. With the amendment from a gable to a hip roof, at the highest point, the roof will still be 4.9 meters, in addition to its 4.6 meters in length, causing serious overshadowing, totally intrusive on our outlook and extensively overbearing. The officer said the hipped roof, together with the existing 1.8 meter fence, will reduce any undue impact. How can that be the case when this structure will only be 600 millimeters, 2 feet from the boundary? Incidentally, the 1.8 meter fence was erected after the application was submitted. The original boundary fence was only 1 meter. So the applicant has clearly been advised to increase its height. The officer negated the crucial aspect of the orientation of the 2 bungalows, which do not sit parallel. Whilst the officer said there is a slight angle, the angle is 30 degrees. Therefore, the proposal will obscure a 45-degree angle from the nearest window. We asked the committee to scrutinize the block plan, which provides the clearest evidence of the scale, proximity, and orientation of the proposal. Regarding street scene and the visual amenity, the officer made reference to a degree of screening created by number 25 on the western approach to the site. True. However, there are 10 other bungalows in the cul-de-sac to the east of the site, which directly face it. They are not protected by any screening. No other bungalow has a front extension, so the size and length of the proposal is totally out of character. The proposal will remove in the region of 24 square meters from the driveway, bringing the building much closer to the public highway. This will not allow for the 3 vehicles regularly parked there, inevitably leading to dangerous on-street parking in a tight cul-de-sac where small children often play. The applicant had a previous rear extension application refused because of its size and position close to the boundary of 25 Richmond Avenue. The same criterion is 100% relevant to this proposal, and the additional element of it being a front extension. If the proposal was to the western boundary, or if the length could be reduced by 2 to 2.5 meters, then we would have less of an issue with it. It would still impact on our property, but less so.
I'm afraid I'll have to stop you there, Mr.
Okay,
Savage.
thank you for allowing
I've given
me to
you a
speak.
few extra seconds, but I'll have to stop you there. If you could just, thank you. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Chair. I think obviously Mr Savage has gone over most of the points in great detail, and so I won't re-go over those again. But I just wanted to pick up on some of the things that the report says. At 7.1, under the design layout, the report states that the screening is provided from the west, and you can see on the diagram that, yes, that would be the case, but that's not what's being complained about at all. It's the other side, the eastern side, which is the issue. And despite some reductions in size from the original application, obviously the roof has been made into a hipped roof, but it remains broadly the same. There is a slight height differential between the two sites, and the extension will still protrude quite obtrusively into the street scene. And also, which hasn't really been highlighted within the report, obviously the length of the extension is 4.6 metres, and will considerably reduce the number of car parking spaces. I have actually visited the site, and they've got a new fence up between 29 and 27, and also another fence at 90 degrees, sort of just behind about where the red car is on the picture on the screen. So they're going to struggle to put all the cars on that car parking that they're going to have as a reduced car parking space. The angle to which obviously the front room at number 29 will be subjected to it's not parallel, as you can see. So it will, as a long extension, 4.5 metres, it will cut across that front window and create quite a massing effect. The 1.8 metre fencing that has been referred to, that is in situ at the moment, certainly is fairly recently been put up. I visited the site twice, once earlier in the summer and then once early October, I think it was. And it wasn't there at the beginning, and it now is there. So I think that has been installed to try and mitigate concerns that might be put forward, but it really is obtrusive at the moment even, so it's going to even get even worse on the street scene. The site at number 27, as you can see from the picture.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. I'm afraid I'll have to stop you there. Ian, would you like to come back on some of the issues or concerns raised?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, the photograph neatly shows the arrangement there. So there is a stagger in the street as you move around the turning head. So 25, 27, 29, they move around the layout of that sort of old-fashioned turning head. Yes, there will be an impact on the neighbour. I agree that there will be an impact on Mr. Savage, his front window. That is something we've taken into account, of course. I mean, there's often impact with proposals. It's whether that impact is harmful and worthy of refusing it and defending that on any subsequent appeal. Clearly, you could erect a form of boundary treatment on that boundary up to 2 metres in height. It could be a wall or a fence or any other means of enclosure before you get to abutting the highway. So there is potential there for a taller boundary treatment. It is nearly 3 metres to eaves level. The roof has been hipped during the life of the application to address some of those concerns, and we feel that just on balance, Chair, that we couldn't refuse it and defend it confidently at appeal, hence the recommendation. But I mean, clearly there will be some impact, but we don't feel that's beyond reasonable tolerances.
Thank you. Anything from Highways?
No, our colleagues have had a night off tonight, Chair, but there's no highway objections to it. It's a rather large frontage, still get a couple of cars on there, and low vehicle speeds, obviously, in a cul-de-sac turning head, so no, there weren't any objections.
Thank you, Ian. Members of the committee? No. Well, I mean, whilst I share Mr. Savage's concern, but it is a single-storey extent. Sorry, Councillor West, I didn't see you waving there.
It's all right, Chair. I'm hiding in the corner. I think, I mean, most of it's been said. Mr. Savage and Councillor Skelton have already given a lot of detail. I think my reason for speaking was to go back to that earlier application. Sorry, my laptop's now not cooperating. That earlier planning application that was refused, that talks about by reason of the size and position close to the boundary, would lead to an unacceptable level of massing. Ian's already said that, yes, there would be sort of detriment to Mr. and Mrs. Savage and their property. And looking at the angle of the property, I completely understand how that is. I mean, my bigger concern, and I am surprised that there's no sort of highways issue, my bigger concern is that if that extension is built onto that boundary, visibility, and yes, I know it's a cul-de-sac and potentially a quiet cul-de-sac, but we are told that children play in the street regularly, is that lack of visibility. It doesn't look like there's a huge amount of space to sort of do a three-point turn on the drive to come out, so you may well be reversing out and not being able to see because of if that extension is created there. And as I say, I'm surprised that there's nothing from highways, because that does give me some concern. But I know we look at does the benefit outweigh the harm? The benefit to the applicant is clear, but the harm to the neighbour is also very clear. I am surprised that the team have suggested approval just on the grounds that we might not win at appeal. But I'm not sure that Ian's can have anything else to say. You've asked the questions about highways. And yeah, I'm not sure there's anything else to come back with. I just wanted to log my concern over those items, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor West. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I can appreciate the difference it's going to make to what is that front window in the adjacent bungalow. I think it comments that room at the moment is a bedroom, but it will probably remain a bedroom because it'll be so shaded and less likely to want to give flexibility to the use of rooms in that bungalow. But I was just wondering can we have some more information about how the 45-degree angle is interpreted when we've actually got quite a high roof rather than a first floor in the adjacent building? Because I don't know, do we step it back and take the midpoint of the roof and consider that to be the point that we're working our 45-degree from? We obviously mentioned that that's being considered, but I just wondered how it was considered, because we normally look at it as the first floor and the impact of the first floor on the ground floor adjacent. And the other thing I just wanted to check on is that there isn't a significant ground level difference between the two properties, which could also exacerbate the situation.
Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure on the ground level difference. I couldn't be decisive on that as to what it is precisely. In terms of the 45-degree rule, we've got policy H16 in the local plan, which refers to house extensions, and it's got generic criteria. The 45-degree rule is something that was drawn up many years ago, and it specifically relates to rear extensions, albeit two-storey extensions and first floor extensions, so we wouldn't readily apply it in this scenario. It's clearly with this application we have got a stagger within the street, as you can see, number 25, which has also been extended on the western side of the site, stands some distance forward of the host dwelling, so there is a stagger in the street. We've taken that into consideration when looking at the overall design and street scene impact. And in terms of the massing impact, yeah, it's a single story. We've considered the issue of what the potential boundary treatment could be, a 2-metre wall or fence, and we've considered the roof design, and we've amended that by including a hip. So we feel we've gone as far as we can do, Chair. Clearly, there will be some impact, but as I say, not to a level where we could refuse it and defend and appeal confidently. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Well, look, most of you know that I'm not afraid of taking anything, to appeal, whether we win or lose, right? But on this situation, I mean, we have to be realistic and look at it. Whilst, as I said, I share the concern of Mr. Savage, but it is a single-story extension. you know, and the houses aren't in line there. If they were, then we could probably say, well, look, this is out of character of the street, but they're different types of houses, setback, also, and from a planning perspective, there is nothing that we could possibly say is unreasonable, and we're refusing it on that. If we do refuse it, it's almost certain that you know, the applicant will win on appeal, because there is no planning grounds on which to refuse this. So if nobody has anything to say, can we move to the vote? All those in favor of the recommendation?
I think that's 5, Chair. Are you getting that, Stephen? Thank you.
Anybody against? 3.
3 against, Chair. Thank you.
That recommendation is carried. Yes.
Chair, I'm quite interested on that situation with the 45-degree guidance only applying to rear extensions. We obviously get a lot more rear extensions than front extensions, but could we ask officers to consider whether that should be reviewed and for front extensions to be included in that as part of our review of our local plan?
Ian?
Yeah, just as a matter of interest, it was something that I presented about 15 years ago, and it was probably longer actually. It's a very old bit of supplementary policy essentially, and there are other authorities that deal with it slightly differently, but our stance has been pretty consistent. I actually introduced it to that meeting some years ago because we were trying to amend the position where we took the measurement from on neighbouring windows, and it was voted down, so it stayed as it was. So it's been in the form it's been in since about 1986. So I will take a look at it, and I'll speak to colleagues, and we'll look at it in terms of the new local plan, which will be set in motion moving into the new year. So I will take it on board and consult with Councillor Kerr accordingly.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, as long as we've been consistent with it, I don't think there's a problem, but yet maybe it's time to revisit it and see what additions, subtractions we can make from it. Okay, moving on to item 3, which is land north of Snelsmore Lane, Chellaston, and it's pages 12 to 26 on your report, and it's Stephen Bay.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a hybrid application on land north of Snelsmore Lane, Chellaston, and it seeks permission for the following. Outline permission for residential units up to 800 dwellings, with all matters reserved except for access to be fixed off Snelsmore Lane and Field Lane, a sustainable drainage system of attenuation ponds and swales, a new primary school alongside open space, including the creation of a country park. And secondly, a full permission for 245 dwellings, including site roads, infrastructure, landscaping, attenuation ponds and play areas on 2 phases of the development site. Members may recall that this application was reported to Planning Control Committee back in November 2019, when members resolved to approve the proposal subject to resolving all technical issues and the signing of a Section 106 agreement. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the application, to seek approval to the current proposed terms of the Section 106 provisions, and to address concerns raised by an adjacent landowner in relation to committee's previous consideration of the application. In seeking to resolve the technical details, an addendum to the environmental statement and a revised drainage and landscape strategy has been submitted. They've been the subject of reconsultations, and the Council's land drainage team now raise no objections subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions. As part of the reconsultation process, I can report that the Council received a total of 35 representations. These included 26 objections from local residents, from Elveston Parish Council and from Chellaston Residents Association. The majority of issues raised as part of the recent reconsultation process relate to the principle of the development, which was already considered by committee back in November 2019. However, for completeness, I can report that the following issues were raised by local residents. Unacceptable development of green land, particularly narrowing of the green wedge. Alternative sites are more appropriate. Increased traffic generation and local congestion. Flooding and drainage concerns. Highway and pedestrian safety. Impacts on residential amenity, particularly by pollution and construction activity. Lack of local services to deal with increased housing. Impact on wildlife, trees and hedgerows. Concerns that the housing density was too high, and the impacts on the security of adjoining businesses. Various issues were raised by consultees with respect to the amended details, particularly the police design officer raised concerns relating to community safety matters, and the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust raised concerns relating to the impact on a local wildlife site. I can report that amendments have been received relating to the full application phases, which address and mitigate those concerns, and officers are now of the view that the revised details would not result in any overriding harm. The Council have also received submissions from Relic Solicitors on behalf of the adjoining landowner, and I will address those later. So turning now to the main issues. Firstly, the Section 106 agreement. The negotiations towards the signing of the agreement have been delayed for a number of reasons, particularly due to the current COVID pandemic. However, these delays have resulted in a significant increase in the cost of delivering the primary school, which members will recall was approved by committee last month. The revised school cost will be almost £3 million more than was estimated at the time that the application was last brought to committee, and that's also over and above that which was included in the scheme assessed at that time by the district valuer. Consequently, the applicants have requested that the council agree to the removal of the final viability assessment, which currently includes the provision of contributions towards off-site infrastructure, should it be viable at the conclusion of the development. The applicants have submitted a statement explaining and justifying their request, and this has been forwarded to members prior to the meeting. In summary, the applicants confirm that since the agreed site valuation in 2019, they have renegotiated to fund a significant increase in the proposed primary school contribution. They have also agreed that the funding of the increased school contribution will be made early, and that payment will be at the commencement of the land transfer process. The applicants point out that any developer will still have to go through a valuation exercise whenever any reserved matters application is approved. This requires a valuation exercise to be undertaken, overseen by the district valuer to assess any uplift in viability across the proposed scheme, and thereby would allow the potential provision of additional affordable housing. The applicants state that their Section 106 requirements should be balanced by the concession that there will be no longer a valuation exercise at the end of the development. This is on the basis that the other valuation triggers remain, so there is still an opportunity to capture any enhanced value should that become available. The applicant also states that a revaluation at the end of the development will affect whether any developer can proceed with the construction, as it means that they would have no certainty of what their actual commercial return will be, which is highly usual in a normal commercial scenario. The removal of the final valuation, therefore, also ensures that development will come forward to provide much needed homes, and also to ensure the provision of the new primary school is not delayed. Following my presentation, Rachel Reid will further clarify progress with the Section 106 negotiations. Turning now to the comments made by Relic Solicitors on behalf of the adjoining landowner. Again, these comments have been circulated to members and are summarised as follows. They argue that the only way to secure the sustainable urban extension, as envisaged in both the local plan allocation and the overall master plan, is to provide the necessary bus links between this development and that of the adjoining landowner, which is known as Bolton Moor 2. The bus links will be able to provide a fully integrated development. The solicitors also correctly clarify that any planning decision cannot override private property access rights. The main thrust of their argument is that any grant of planning permission without requiring the necessary links between the two sites would be contrary to local plan policy, would not be in the public interest, and would be unlawful. It is accepted that the position taken by the adjoining landowner could impact on the ability to deliver the linkages between their land and the Snelsmore Grange site. This would have the consequential effect of limiting the aspirations of Core Strategy Policy AC23 in delivering a comprehensive cross-boundary development. Nevertheless, conditions are to be imposed on the permission which duplicate those on the Bolton Moor side, which try as far as may be practically possible to ensure that the links are secured. Members may recall that contingencies were outlined in the November 2019 committee report, which was clear as to the impact on the public transport provision. The report at that time explained that the planned bus service would only serve the Snelsmore Grange site and acknowledged that whilst contrary to the expectations of a coordinated sustainable urban extension, to delay a decision at that time would be unacceptable in terms of hampering the housing delivery. A standalone bus service may be contrary to the expectations of a coordinated scheme. However, it is only achievable when relying on the cooperation of all parties. To delay the public transport solution will hamper the housing delivery, and members have previously agreed that this was not considered to be acceptable. This site is part of one of the largest local plan housing allocations, and the council are heavily reliant on it to achieve the local plan target of 11,000 homes up to 2028. Officers consider that the proposed development would be sustainable in its own right and would not need to rely upon links to the adjoining site being agreed. A statement of public sector equality duty has been prepared to consider the potential impacts on people with protected characteristics and those who may be potentially disadvantaged by the potential severing of links between the site and the adjoining land. This statement, which was circulated to members, concludes that the proposed access strategy across the site with a network of footpaths and cycleways would be acceptable for all people. Furthermore, a planning condition also requires the applicant to enter into a minimum service level agreement with a bus operator to deliver a service linking to the adjoining local centres and the city centre. Furthermore, all houses will be within 400 metres of the bus route. For those reasons, it is considered that the potential inability to secure the linkages between the two sites would be unlikely to result in a negative impact on the provision of access facilities for people with protected characteristics as required by the public sector equality duty. Finally, members' attention is drawn to the note provided by the applicant's legal counsel in response to both Rollitt's letter and to the viability issue. It is also worth mentioning that this committee report has been overseen by legal counsel, who has also commented on the Rollitt's position. Our counsel is satisfied that the report remains robust, particularly the conclusions at paragraph 8.3, which acknowledge the threat to the linkages due to the current standoff between the neighbouring developers. The report weighs in the balance the need for the linkages and the potential delay to the development. It also acknowledges the limiting effects on the aspirations of policy AC23. Paragraph 8.4 reaches a planning judgment on the sustainability of the proposed development. Council advises that the recommendation that the development is overall in accordance with the development plan is a matter of planning judgment. As a matter of law, the report does not misinterpret policy AC23, but reaches conclusions on the application of this policy and on the policy requirements of the local plan, when read as a whole, which is a matter of planning judgment. So in conclusion, members are recommended to ratify your previous resolution and subject to the signing of the Section 106 agreement to grant approval for the development. I'll now hand over to Rachel to give further information with respect to the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. When the application was brought to the committee in 2019, the scheme had been assessed by the district valuer as the applicants claimed that the policy-compliant package of contributions made the site unviable. The district valuer agreed and concluded that little more than the primary school and 10% affordable housing could be delivered. Despite this, however, the applicants agreed to the following package of contributions as being essential to the delivery of the site: a 1.5 form entry primary school, including nursery provision, 10% affordable housing, including provision for wheelchair units, a country park and amenity open space, including play areas, a bus service to serve the development, a contribution towards secondary education, contribution towards traffic calming on Chellaston High Street, a contribution towards walking and cycling improvements, and travel plan monitoring. The applicants also agreed to a viability review at the submission of each reserve matters application to assess whether further affordable housing could be provided, and a final viability review at the end of the development. However, as previously outlined, the issues around the pandemic, the time taken to resolve technical issues, and the issues previously outlined in Stephen's presentation regarding the linkages have led to a delay in the signing of the Section 106 agreement. This has also led to a significant increase of almost £3 million in the cost of delivering the primary school on that which was included in the viability appraisal. The primary school is essential to the delivery of the development, but the additional cost significantly exacerbates these viability issues. In addition, due to the need to provide the primary school early in the development, the full contribution is required up front. This, coupled with the potential issues outlined in the first part of the presentation, presents significant challenges, risks, and uncertainties to the delivery and financing of the development. In order to accept additional risk up front, it is important that a developer has certainty of the financial position at the end of the development, and with this in mind, the applicant has requested the removal of the final viability review. The contributions currently included within this clause are set out in the report. Whilst it could be said that the inclusion of that clause provides little risk to a developer, as if the development is unviable, no further contributions will be made. However, uncertainty is a significant commercial risk and puts the delivery of the development in doubt. This is a scenario that the District Valuer has confirmed is now commonplace in the development industry. And as previously outlined, the final viability reviews are now scarcely used. Furthermore, the inclusion of interim reviews, which require the applicant to use any excess profit to deliver additional affordable housing, mean that the likelihood of achieving a position to secure any contributions at the final review would have been low, and with the additional upfront costs, lower still. Throughout the negotiation on this matter, the applicants have expressed a willingness to commit to the rest of the Section 106 package, including the reserve matters reviews, which were presented in 2019. The delivery of the primary school is critical to the delivery of the development. Any further delays in the signing of the Section 106 agreement puts more pressure on Derby's housing supply and on existing education infrastructure, as the school will also serve the now completed Fellowlands Way development. Should agreement be reached to accept the removal of the final overage clause, the Section 106 agreement will be signed shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. We have Mr. Chambers.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. I'm Tony Chambers-Kirk from End Cottage Kennels. As an adjacent landowner, and after logging an objection to the cycle/footpath that connects Snellsmore Grange with Field Lane Recreation Ground, this will run along my boundary. I have some concerns. In the framework plan in the street charter, this includes a privacy strip. Will these be included in plans for cycle and footpaths? The land adjacent to End Cottage, where the path will run, is a secure field at the moment, but after development this will be an open space. Will a secure boundary be constructed, or a hedgerow? Dog theft is a #1 concern for me and in local news at the moment. The access lane to End Cottage Kennels is very narrow, with cars turning and offloading. If the proposed foot/cycle path terminates on this lane, has the traffic been considered? And the proximity of the path to the kennel boundary could disturb dogs, causing noise complaints, which could cause us operating problems. And finally, with 3 cycle footpaths and a road all joining Snellsmore Grange to the Field Lane Recreation Ground, one only 50 metres away from where this path is planned to join, is it actually needed, or would it just be better leaving it as a open meadow? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Mr. Gilbert.
My clients are the owners of what is known as Bolton Moor, or BM2. In this address, I wish to focus on the unnecessary compromise that members are being asked to make in return for ensuring a housing supply at Snelsmore Grange. The fundamental premise of Snelsmore Grange has always been that it would be fully integrated with BM2. This includes the use of links from Snelsmore Grange to BM2 to allow residents of Snelsmore Grange to access directly the facilities on Bolton Moor, and for the bus service loop to operate as a single viable part of the whole. The officer's recommendation seeks to abandon this sensible and agreed policy in the interests of securing a land supply, but my client's clear message to members is that they can have both, the desired integration and an early land supply. Yes, this will mean the applicant acquiring private law rights to secure the right to use the BM2 links, and the inference that there is somehow anything wrong with my client seeking to negotiate for the grant of those rights is wrong. The applicant claims that it has negotiated but has failed to secure agreement, and this appears to have been a key consideration for officers. But this is not the case. Bellway made a proposal 6 years ago but very quickly withdrew it. My client has made it clear that it is willing to negotiate the necessary rights and has repeatedly made attempts to negotiate. Bellway's response has been that the applicant does not wish to discuss access and the applicant does not need my client's access. Based on the erroneous view that negotiations have taken place but failed, the officer's recommendation has unnecessarily compromised good planning policy and the public interest in an attempt to secure an immediate land supply. But members do not need to choose. They can have a fully integrated development and an early supply. So what should happen now? The applicant should be told that securing that the links is necessary for any permission to be granted. A negotiation would then occur between the applicant and my client, and permission can then be granted. Crucially, if my client were to refuse to engage reasonably in those negotiations, then the council could compulsorily acquire the necessary rights. As an alternative, if the committee does wish to grant permission now in respect of Snelsmore Grange, then a way forward is by including a Grampian condition limiting the extent of the development until the legal rights have been secured. What the committee does not need to do is to compromise. It can have a fully integrated, policy-compliant development and an early land supply. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Stephen, would you like to come back on some of them?
Yes, Chair. Firstly, on the comments raised by Mr. Chambers-Kirk, which particularly regarding the impact on the kennels and the privacy strip, the secure boundary, the majority of these matters will be dealt with by way of a subsequent reserve matters application on that particular parcel of land, and I would certainly suggest that at that time those particular issues are given full consideration, and clearly Mr. Chambers-Kirk would be notified of that application. I'm not aware of any highway issues concerning the access there, so there's nothing more I can add on that particular side of it. With respect to the matters raised by Mr. Gilbert, I think they've been generally covered in the presentation that I gave at the start, and we have Mr. Teasdale here if he wants to add anything further on the legal aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Stephen.
I mean, I think Stephen's already covered most of the points that have been presented. Obviously, you've had before you sort of the letter from Mr. Gilbert of Relic representing the landowner, and you've also had circulated the opinion from Christopher Young QC, who's acting on Bellways. I think in terms of in terms of what Mr. Young says, I mean, there's no issues that I would have. I mean, sort of in terms of his approach, which accords with our approach, and just a quote from his opinion. He says that the links may be desirable, but that absence does not make the permission unlawful. And importantly, the officer's report makes clear why those links are not possible. It also makes clear that the proposal is acceptable and sustainable without those links. reasons for not providing them having been given by the officers. Therefore, there are no grounds for judicial review of the permission. I mean, that accords with my particular view and that of council in terms of when assessing the report. I mean, there is one particular specific point that Mr. Gilbert raises, which I certainly would agree in terms of what he said tonight, and in fact he refers to in his letter. I mean, the fact that his client, as the adjacent landowner, is seeking a commercial benefit out of the position he finds himself in, it's clearly not relevant consideration of the matter tonight. We're just purely considering sort of the planning merits of the matter, and as I say, it's a matter of planning judgment. You've got the details in the report, and it's a question of obviously the issue of delivery of housing in a timely matter, and it's recognised obviously that the full policy, desirable policy issues from the policy in terms of the transport links might not be delivered, but it's a balance there. I think one other point actually worth picking up from Mr. Young's advice, and it's a point that I was intending to sort of touch on anyway tonight, is that given that this site has clear viability issues, the additional costs incurred of having to negotiate and pay for to acquire rights by sort of over the land will simply add to the viability issues, and that will obviously impact on sort of the potentially impact on the Section 106 contribution. So in that sense, you're paying Peter to pay Paul, or robbing Peter to pay Paul, I think is the right phrase. So in that terms, I think sort of the view from our council and myself is that the report is robust, and it's clearly a matter of planning judgment for you to consider tonight as such. I think that's probably all I need to say at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, sorry. My apologies. I've nearly missed Mr. Hawley out.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you very much. I was getting a little worried there. And good evening, members. I apologise. I can't make eye contact with you all because we're all so spread out. If I could just address you, please, on two matters briefly. My name is Christian Hawley. I'm a planning barrister, and I'm here on behalf of Bellway Homes. I've been working with Christopher Young, QC, on this site and advising Bellway for 2 years now. Those 2 points are the matters raised by Relic on behalf of the adjacent landowners and the Section 106 agreement. In terms of the objections from the adjacent landowners, I'll be blunt. The only reason that Mr. Gilbert's here and the only reason that I'm here taking up 6 minutes of your precious and valuable time is because those landowners wish to seek to extract a financial payment. And the way they wish to do that is by threatening the council with judicial review. Put shortly, there would be no basis for challenging the decision of the committee this evening to approve the resolution, or approve the recommendation of officers, and that is for 5 reasons. Firstly, the development has been designed and proposed on a standalone basis, but which remains capable of physical integration with Bolton Moor. Secondly, officers have considered the acceptability and the accessibility of the development and concluded that suitable and appropriate access is provided for all modes of transport. Thirdly, that the proposal constitutes, on a standalone basis, sustainable development. Fourthly, officers have considered and responded to the objections made by the adjacent landowners, and they've given clear reasoning in their report. And fifthly, officers have concluded, taking all of that into account, that overall the proposal is in accordance with the development plan. And that last point is critical. Because what Rollic's do is invite you to impermissibly focus on a single criteria of a single policy, when of course what one needs to do is to consider the proposal against the policies of the development plan taken as a whole. That is what your officers have done. They have concluded that it is in accordance with the development plan as a whole, and indeed both I and Christopher Young agree with that position, as does the Council's external legal counsel. Just turning briefly to the Section 106 agreement, I think it's been amply covered, but just in terms of the points that were raised, that clearly what the 106 agreement does now is allow for the early delivery of the school, despite the significantly increased costs. It provides for viability reappraisals at each reserve matters stage, and represents an appropriate obligation in order to secure the early delivery of housing, particularly affordable housing, which comes with the first tranche, and the school, which are clear public benefits. And I commend the officer's carefully reasoned report.
Thank you, Mr. Hawley.
Thank you very much,
for that. Okay. One thing I can assure you is that we're not afraid of threats of either judicial review or appeals, so we'll make our mind up accordingly. Members of the public, committee. Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, Chair, I should have declared an interest in this, as I'm a councillor for Chellaston, but I've not been involved in any resident objections.
I don't think there's a problem with that, is there, Stephen?
No, that's fine.
I mean, we all have sort of applicants come before, or rather applications come before us that are from various wards that we represent, and I don't think that in itself is an issue. Sorry, who was next with it? Councillor Carr or Councillor Kerr?
Yes, Chair. I think on the whole it's a good outcome. The development does look pretty sustainable. I'm pleased that we're going to get the bus service through there, and I also noticed that the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust comments, which were a bit adverse to start with, have been taken into account, and that hedgerows are now going to be kept and some trees are going to remain near the school, which is very good. I am disappointed at the final valuation decision, because that's going to cost us some. And you know, we're always told that private developers and so on are willing to take on risk, but the first whiff of a risk they duck for cover and expect the public to cough up the money. So I'm disappointed in those aspects of it, but I think on basis it's approvable.
Thank you, Mike. Lucy.
Thank you. I can be more specifically critical about this. What I do appreciate is I really like the sustainable transport links, and I think that it has scope to being a really nice development. I think it's really sad that we seem to be tangled up with a civil issue rather than a planning issue about land boundaries. Yes, we could do some compulsory purchase, something or other, and become heavy-handed at it if we had the money. But I don't think that's the solution. I think people actually need to acknowledge that there is a responsibility that the whole of society has to make sure that things are developed in a manageable manner. And I hope that whatever stumbling blocks there are get sorted pretty quickly. I am, however, more concerned about the Section 106 situation. We've heard that the cost of the school has gone up by a significant amount, probably, I don't know, something like 40%, maybe even higher, which would suggest that the housing cost will also be significantly higher. I don't know whether house prices are going up, but I don't think they're going up at that rate. So I suspect that the actual the margins that for this site are likely to be more challenging than they would have been 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when the site was being designed. And that's clearly primarily a commercial matter, and it's rubbing up to us because of internal risk elements. Now, as I see it, if the prices are all going up for the cost of the development, the 20% expected profit from here will also be a larger figure, and the likelihood of reaching that larger figure is actually smaller, and therefore the likelihood of the end of design, end of build, finding that there's anything to pay is actually reducing the risk of actually having to pay anything back to us. So I see it as a risk, a reduced risk of payment to us, given the financial situation. And actually, the pounds in the pocket valuated from the whole of this site will actually be greater, because the 20% of a bigger cost is bigger than it was originally. And that's the way I read it. Okay, I'm not in charge of this, I'm not a developer, but that's the way I read it as a councillor. That said, if we're going to have a community that works, some of the elements listed in 731, which we would be losing if there's a big increase in house prices and some profit at the end of it that we're allowed to access. In particular, the community centre and health centres. We all know how challenging it is to access GPs at the moment. And if we aren't putting something into that side of sort of local NHS as part of this development, it's going to make that even more difficult and make it actually make it more difficult to do things like sell houses in an area where you can't get a GP, and that is something that's going to be a consideration. So I think it actually would benefit us not to renegotiate the Section 106, apart from potentially taking away the improvements to Moorways swimming pool as one of the elements here. And I'd be very happy to knock that off the list, because that's happening anyway. My other 2 points are a concern that if we rely only on the reserved matter applications, those reserved matter applications could come in really quickly. They could be in next week, next month, before we have any change in the viability assessment. And that's another reason why I think we ought to hold on to that viability assessment at the end, because it gives us surety at the end, not in potentially 2 months or something's time. And my other concern is just the practical point of the dead-end roads, which I think are probably only indicative at this stage. But if we're not going to manage to link up, can we make sure that we've got some turning heads at those points, so that we've not got problems with vehicle issues if we don't get the comprehensive development happening. Thank you.
I did quite catch what you said about the Section 106 agreement, because you wasn't talking into the mic.
Oh, sorry, Chair. I feel we ought to not succumb to the renegotiation of the Section 106, because I actually think it's a reduced risk of having to pay anything out, not an increased risk for the developer. And my only concession on that would be to take away the bullet point in 731, which talks about improvements at Moorways swimming pool, because I don't think that directly relates to this site, whereas the other points I think do.
Anybody else? No. Well, I agree with what Councillor Carr said, and you as well, Lucy, and I mentioned this in the sort of pre-agenda meeting as well. I think developers, have to compromise with us. It's not a question of whether we give everything and don't get anything in return. In terms of the 106 and what, if they were to say to us that, look, if we made sort of X amount of money, which we thought we were going to make, that's fine, that's ours, but anything above that, some of it will come back to Derby City Council, because we are taking the risks as well. But it seems to me to be at the moment one-way traffic, and I don't know why the developers feel that all of a sudden the risk has become so much that they feel that they need to renegotiate all of this. I'm not comfortable with the fact that we have to renegotiate Section 106 and give them more leeway in terms of what they can and what can't do. But it's entirely up to you. I don't have any objections against the application. Yes, we need houses. Yes, it's a standalone and any viable proposition. But it seems to be putting a lot of onus on us in terms of they're saying that there could be risks, and they want us to share the risks, but don't necessarily want to share any of the extra profit that they might make. You know, it seems one way to me. Perhaps Ian could shed some light on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm always in these situations. I will defer to the people with greater knowledge in these situations. Clearly, the cost of the school has gone up appreciably. That's in the mix. As Rachel's outlined, the school will be delivered very early in the process, and also there are the review mechanisms throughout of the Reserve Matters submissions. I don't think they'll all be in one go, Lucy, Councillor Kerr. I think they will be clearly on a phased basis. And I would defer to what occurred after our pre-agenda meeting when we talked about the position of the district valuer, and Rachel went away and discussed it with them in terms of what is the normal stance with end of development reappraisals, and they are very uncommon. This is something that is reiterated by Christopher Young QC, who deals with these things all over the country, and for me, based on what we are duty bound to do in terms of how we look at Section 106 agreements, how they relate to profit, and what it says in the planning practice guidance about a reasonable level of developer profit. I think we're in a position now, having had the application for a considerable amount of time, where we've got the best position that we're in. I would promote the recommendation, Chair. I think we've spoken to the DV various stages in the last couple of years, and I think with the safeguards in place for the Reserve Matters reappraisals, we've got a good Section 106 deal, Chair.
Thank you. And I fully understand and agree, you know, with what you're saying. But as I said to Mr. Hawley at the start of the meeting, I said we're not afraid of judicial reviews, and we certainly don't care about, you know, some barrister says in his chambers, right? What we care about is how it affects our residents and whether we're getting value for money in terms of the development. So, in my opinion, currently this is sort of one-way traffic, and I can understand, you know, how far down the line they've come, but costs have gone up. What I'm saying is that, you know, just as an example, that if they expected to make 40,000 per house and the costs have gone up, but by the time they build, you know, they make 50,000 per house rather than 40. I mean, I don't see why they can't share a percentage of that with us, but, you know, this has gone too far down the line. But I would like to see something in future which restricts this ability for developers to come at, you know, to us at a late stage, knowing so much work has gone into this by our officers that we'll find it difficult to completely turn it down. I think in future we should be more careful, because in my sort of time here of 17, 18 years on the committee, I've always seen that if you give a developer an inch, they will take the proverbial mile plus a bit more. And we have to be careful of that in future. Anybody else want to add anything? Well,
Chair, I just think it might be worth Rachel just outlining the review mechanisms as part of Reserve Matters submissions, and the fact that the school cost that the developer is bearing is now at £3 million.
Yes, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair. Yes. I mean, I think I really just wanted to sort of come back on Councillor Kerr's point about the risk and the at the end of the development and the likelihood of making a profit. I mean, you know, it is true, you know, that if the costs have gone up, then the likelihood of making a profit is less, but the issue is, including that viability mechanism at the end is still a risk, and for in terms of development finance, there will always be a risk. However likely making that profit is, there will always be a risk there, and that's what sort of is seen. So I think that's sort of an important point to remember. You know, the risk. And I think also in terms of looking at the priorities in terms of what contributions we've negotiated. Obviously, you know, we've got the school there. We've got 10% affordable housing. The cost of the school has gone up significantly. The implication, you know, sort of keeping that viability mechanism in there is obviously further negotiation, further delay of the school, and the cost of the school is likely to go up even further. You know, therefore further impacting on the development and on the viability, and, you know, potentially other Section 106 contributions as well. So, you know, I just really wanted to, you know, sort of further highlight the risks involved. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. But, you know, as I said earlier, you know, we're not going to sort of debate this too long, but there are risks in everything. You've got a risk a local builder takes on a job. If the materials go up, maybe he doesn't make as much as he expected to. And in this particular case, we're not saying to the developers that, look, if you know, don't make as much as you thought you would, we still want to share. What we're asking for in future application is that should we be in a position to ask them to share the extra profits that they are making, and with us taking most of the risk as well. That's what I'm stating. I'm not asking you know, the developers to incur a loss in building houses, but it has to be two-way traffic. You know, yes, we want business, but we want it at the right times, at the right terms rather. And you know, as I said, because this has gone on for so long, so much work has gone into it, I don't particularly want to throw a spanner in the works, and it is an outline planning application as well. But in future, I think we have to be more mindful of the fact that we don't let developers take us, you know, so far down the line and then want special conditions. They should state first what they expect us to do, and we'd take it from there. But Councillor Carr.
You make an excellent point, Chair. I used to, on occasions, project manage projects where we had a risk and revenue share line with the contractor. However, it does require the contractor to provide completely open books. I'm not sure the average building developer are very happy with that, Chair.
Stephen, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to come in. I mean, Rachel will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's not always the developer who dictates the risk. I mean, he's obviously going to have to, that is quite often dictated by the financial backer, sort of who's and sort of securing the funding for the developer. So it's not always, and again, I'll leave it to Rachel to correct me if that is not the case in this instance, but that often dictates the risk, securing the funding to do your development. So it doesn't always come from the developer themselves.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Kerr.
I think this is a really interesting discussion, because we normally talk about what the bricks and mortar or the wood frame or whatever is going to look like. But here we're actually talking about the financing of development. And we're not experts in that, but the way I see it is that if the cost of the school goes up by £3 million, then the likelihood of making that 20% profit at the end reduces, because we've spent 3 million of what might have been profit already. If the cost of the housing structures, the materials for the homes go up, and the price of the sale price for the properties doesn't go up to the same degree, there will be less profit, and the likelihood of handing over money at the end is less. So I can't see that even the person who's investing money up front to develop this is actually going to be at a higher risk, because the likelihood at the end is that the 20% has grown and the cash in hand is going to be greater. There's also a great many business investment areas at the moment who are looking to invest in things that aren't to do with fossil fuels, and to put together a site like this, which would, particularly if it had a good carbon footprint element to it and been designed for good environmental credentials, there's money out there that is looking to go into things like that as it divests from fossil fuels. So I can't see that there's going to be an issue in finding financial backers either. I just think it's a pity that there are so many ways in which we're not communicating well on this.
Thank you, Lucy. Final speaker then, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair. You do make a good point. And materials and construction costs increasing, which we accept, will be passed on to higher prices for the actual properties themselves, the dwellings themselves. So I accept that the school's going to cost more. Schools are just going to keep increasing in cost as we move forward, regardless of the financial or economic situation or material supply issues that we have currently. The point is, higher construction costs will be directly passed on to higher purchase costs. So, you know, there is a buffer that I think the developers and the investors can take advantage of there, and so we shouldn't be giving too much away.
Thank you, Matthew. Right. If there's nobody else, can we move to the vote? Somebody moving it? Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation?
Ten in favour, Chair.
Anybody against? Okay.
And one against, was that Councillor Kerr? Yep.
That recommendation is carried. If you guys want to leave, we'll wait till you've gone. Okay, moving on to item 4, which is pages 27 to 36, Charnwood Street, 27 Charnwood Street. And to tell us about that is Stephen again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Slightly shorter presentation this time. This site comprises the former Ukrainian Social Club, which is a detached 3-storey building with a large rear function room extension and a rear car park access from Melbourne Street. The premises will be used as part of the proposal by the Padley Group to provide activities to support those who are seeking to move out of their cycle of deprivation. The hub premises will give opportunities to develop cooking and dietary skills, job seeking, healthy living and basic IT skills to potentially lead to employment. Other organisations will also use the centre to deliver workshops and advice sessions. There are minimal external alterations proposed, and the premises are having to relocate from their existing city centre site to facilitate the Beckett Well redevelopment. The social club has operated since 1958, and there were no conditions imposed on the original planning permission which restricted either the use or the operating hours. This application was referred to Planning Committee by Councillor Hussain, although he is unable to attend tonight's meeting. His comments are outlined in the report. 5 other objections have been received from local residents, from investors and from community groups, and their concerns primarily relate to the perception that the surrounding area is seen as a dumping ground for society's problematic and vulnerable persons, and that the proposal will increase antisocial behaviour in the surrounding area, which will be contrary to residential amenities. There are no technical objections to the proposal from Highways or Environmental Services. Strategic Housing support the proposal, stating that the proposed services will make a significant contribution towards increasing community resilience, and as such they will contribute to the Council's objectives contained within the housing and homelessness strategies. The Police Liaison Officer supports the principle of the proposal, particularly the support services to the homeless in the city as a community benefit. However, they do raise concerns about the potential to exacerbate existing antisocial behaviour problems. In planning policy terms, the proposal is considered to be a replacement community facility, and therefore it would comply with Core Strategy Policy CP21 and would be acceptable in principle. The main determining factor which would appear to relate to the perception of the proposal exacerbating crime and antisocial behaviour in the surrounding area. The purpose of the proposed use is not to provide accommodation for the homeless, but to provide activities to support those who are seeking to move out of a cycle of deprivation. The proposal is different from Padley's former Beckett Street premises, as the organisation has moved to a model of providing support to men and women living in individual self-contained accommodation. The focus of this proposal will be on enabling personal growth and not on supporting habits of dependency. The planning application is based on the principles of developing a home atmosphere in which people will want to learn and grow. Attendance at the centre will be by referral rather than drop-in, and the organisation will enforce a zero-tolerance policy towards drug and alcohol abuse. Overall, there is nothing within the application to suggest that the proposed use will exacerbate any existing problems. Other factors that need to be taken into consideration include, firstly, the fact that the lawful use of the premises as a social club can operate 24 hours a day without any restriction. Secondly, the adjoining premises at number 25 was previously used as a similar hub building by Derby City Mission, and that was granted permission earlier this year to change to residential use. So therefore, the current proposal would effectively replace this use and not increase this type of use in the locality. Finally, with respect to concerns about the use of the premises, I understand that ward councillors have recently met with the Padley Group and, subject to getting approval, have agreed various management measures to mitigate any impact. These include a restriction on sleepovers and no overnight accommodation, except in extreme emergencies. Members understood the benefit of allowing Padley to open from 8 in the morning to enable them to coach a small number of people how to cook their own healthy breakfast. The maximum number of people being trained in the centre at any one time would be up to 15, divided into 2 classes with different timings, and a smoking area would be provided to the rear of the property, and these measures would avoid congestion and congregation on the street. The recommended condition number 4 defines the proposed use of the premises, but I would recommend that it is also extended to allow for emergency overnight accommodation only. And furthermore, it's recommended that condition 5 is reworded to require a management plan to be submitted and approved, which deals with both the operating hours and the running of the premises, which would reflect the matters discussed recently with the ward councillors. Subject to those changes to the conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Stephen. Just before I open it up to members, a couple of things, right, which I believe to be factually incorrect. First and foremost, this is not a community replacement facility, because the Ukrainian club was a membership-only club and opened when it suited them. It didn't open 24 hours. Indeed, sometimes it only opened 2 or 3 nights a week. So that's factually incorrect to state that this is the case. In terms of a couple of things that were put in there, yes, we did have a meeting with the Padley Group, and the wording, I believe, was that there will be no future applications by Padley for overnight stays, and emergency was meant citywide, not just within the Padley Group. So if it was a citywide emergency, i.e. pandemic, flooding, fire, etc., then yes. But no, not just from the Padley Group. If they have an emergency, they're a big enough organization to deal with it. But yeah, citywide, we accepted that if there was something like that, then we could accept people stopping there. The other conditions that were put on there, i.e. The opening hours and the fact that there will be supervision when they have breaks and staggered at times of the classroom so that there aren't 10, 15, 20 people getting out. I mean, the Councillor Hussein's objections and the police objections are correct. You know, those of you that know Arboretum Ward will know that this is being used as a dumping ground for problematic issues. Within 500, 600 yards of this, you have, you know, Green Lane, Mount Street and Hartington Street, where they have problematic issues like that. But it seems to me that for too long, there have been applications that have just gone through unnoticed, and sometimes, they have been disingenuous in terms of what they intended to do eventually. And as I sort of, along with my colleagues, told the Padley Group, we didn't even know they were intending to have teaching classes. What they said to us was this was going to be a drop-in office, right, where the people will be sort of given help and sent to various places around the city. And it's only in pre-agenda that I realized what the application sort of it was in its entirety. And that's why we asked for meetings like that. I believe there have been probably far more suitable places to put this than where it is now, and far economical in terms of what we're spending on it. The Unit 70 in the city centre that will be used for pizza parlours and takeaways that could have been used for a facility like this, and yet they were overlooked. Why, I don't know. Who looked at these? Who looked at the costs of these? It's something that's not for the city of Derby and its residents. It wasn't a very good financial deal, and it still isn't a very good financial deal. And as I said, I didn't like the application, the way that it came in, underhanded, and from a financial point of view, I still think it doesn't make any sense for us to be looking at this rather than somewhere else. But that's my feeling. I wanted to clear a couple of points that Stephen put, and I believe I've done that. So, rest of the committee, anybody want to add anything?
I think, Chair, this is one of those examples where we have to deal with what's on the table in front of us rather than thinking what might have been. And in that light, I just want to comment on the proposed condition number 2, which relates to cycle parking, and I want to make sure that it's secure parking, and also that there's available incidental parking as well for those two things as the details are considered. And my other point in that this is we're seeing the satellite view of this site. I think it would be really nice to put in a landscaping condition. If there is people are going to be going outside, and I hope they will be outside some of the time because outdoor space is valuable, let's see if we can get some outdoor space that isn't standing beside a car, even if what they're doing is smoking. Let's see if there's a little opportunity there to have a mini garden and put that in as a condition.
I think, sorry, Councillor Carey, Stephen might correct me, but I believe at the back of it, there's a car park that's going to be sort of used, some of it is going to be used as a store for food and etc. So they probably won't have much room for landscaping.
I'm not asking for a major scheme, Chair. It's just, we know they're going to go outside to smoke because we've been told that. Let's not smoke in the bike sheds. Let's smoke somewhere that's a little bit more pleasant, and let's make that the landscaping scheme.
Indeed, that's one of the things I asked for when we met the Padley Centre, that the people sort of having comfort breaks or smoke breaks or fresh air should be taken to the back and not at the front garden and chucking their cigarettes away. Is that so, Stephen?
Yes, Chairman. I mean, I'd suggested when I made my presentation that we should amend Condition 5 to require a management plan, and I think that could incorporate details of where this smoking or breakout area would be and its landscape treatment. I've got no objections to that. Can I just pick up? I made a note that Councillor Kerr wanted secure cycle parking, but I missed the other.
And incidental cycle parking, so that if somebody is just turning up, they've got somewhere to put their bike, and that should probably be at the front, whereas the secure cycle parking would be at the back.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm sure that we can amend the
Councillor
condition.
Nawaz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Having spent many months dwelling on this application and recognising some of the excellent work Padley Centre has done in our city over the years, I still have many genuine concerns on this application as a ward councillor and a member of the planning committee. I totally appreciate that Padley Centre is fundamentally changing its services offers to its clients, moving away from providing residential space to one of sport and training services. However, when I think of the severe challenges facing one of the most deprived area within of the most deprived wards, not just in Derby, but in the whole country. I feel I have no objection but to say enough is enough. Within a very short distance from this site is, like you said, Milestone House, Centenary House, Derby City Missions, and many more residential and sports services for those with this sort of life. It is not very good or sustainable blend to so much similar provisions to one of this area. Even the police liaison officer is not happy to this specific side that this views are the effective of using the building for his proposal will make difficult policing. Difficult policing is already in our area as it is in this area. So basically, I will be voting against this application. Thank you, Chair.
If there's nobody else, would somebody like to move it to the vote? Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation?
Seven in favour, Chair. 7.
All those against? I'm abstaining.
2 against, thank you.
That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just one housekeeping item to update members on the applicant's supplementary comments of the 11th of November. This detailed statement supplements the planning statement and it addresses the overall management and operation of this house in multiple occupation and its targeted occupants. It's worth a read, Chair. I mean, clearly the application relates to the land and buildings. It's not a personal permission that would be granted, but I think there is some assurances there for residents in terms of the management ethos and the operation of the building in due course. At pre-agenda, we had no objections from our Highways Development Control colleagues. There's 6 parking spaces, a cycle store and a bin store to serve this proposal. So in terms of its operational movements, we're more than happy with it in Highways terms. 16 objections, Chair, to it, and we've got Councillor Patterson to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Whilst it's sort of highly irregular to allow speakers on the last day, but in this particular instance, because I'm a good fan of Matthew, he's told me that there was some discrepancies in terms of where the request went to, so we will allow Councillor Patterson, and it is only 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak tonight. So I'm speaking tonight on behalf of several local residents who have contacted us objecting to this application. Their concerns cover not only the number of potential occupants at the property, but also safety concerns regarding the number of vehicles potentially using the property. Some of their objections are as follows. This application is for a 7-bedroom house. However, there is no mention of the prospect of multiple occupants living in 1 bedroom, such as couples. At this property, there is room for 6 cars. However, as just stated, this application is for 7 bedrooms. Therefore, if every occupant had their own car, there would be insufficient parking provision at the property. This is before the issue of any potential visitors, such as relatives, friends, deliveries, etc., to the property are considered, which could result in well over 7 vehicles needing access and parking. Western Road is one of the busier roads in Micklover. This property is located on the corner of a junction which not only feeds access to 2 local schools, but is also a main bus route through the ward. Parking on the street outside the property is simply not a safe option, and the prospect of up to more than 7 cars regularly pulling out in and out of the property across a large section of pavement onto a busy junction could pose serious safety concerns. Residents have also pointed out that work has already commenced on the garage of the property, which is intended to be the 7th bedroom, with approval yet to be granted by this committee. This would certainly suggest the applicant is showing arrogance by preempting the committee's decision this evening. As we all know, this application is solely for the 7th bedroom. Had it been for 6, it would not have needed planning permission. We have concerns regarding the plans for the communal areas for the property. It's obviously that the addition of a 7th bedroom and 7th occupant compromises the communal spaces of both lounge and kitchen areas significantly. One would ask why it would seem to be acceptable for 7 people to live in such cramped conditions. This property would be much better served as a 6th bedroom with 6 car park spaces to ensure good standards of living and safer access to the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Members of the committee, anybody? Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I haven't seen this view, this satellite view, presumably off Google before, but it's interesting to see that we've solved the car parking problem by parking on the pavement. And I just wonder whether, we haven't got the highways comments here, but if there are regularly problems with parking on those bits of footway, whether Brisbane Road would benefit from having double yellow lines around its corners to protect that, and this might be an opportunity to do that because of the risk of otherwise an increased risk of otherwise antisocial parking because of that dwelling.
Is that it, Councillor Kerr? Well, just very quickly for me, I know and accept that sometimes we're asked by ward members to make a representation to, the planning committee on an application such as this. But in all honesty, I mean, I can understand maybe Councillor Patterson is not that experienced and has been asked to come in at the last minute. But there is very little wrong with this application. You mentioned the fact that there might be, one car parking on the street. Well, if this type of application came into Arboretum, Darley, Mackworth, they'd welcome it with open arms because over there they get an application for 7 house of multiple occupancy and 7 people and no parking spaces. So I really don't see, from a planning point of view, how we could possibly even think about, sort of refusing this. 7 people live in provision for 6 cars and 1 on street when a lot of these applications come in with no parking spaces. So I admire your willingness to come here, Councillor Patterson, but I'm afraid they should have told you was flogging a dead horse because on planning terms there is absolutely nothing to refuse this on. So if nobody has any other further comments, would somebody like to move it? Thank you. All those in favour of the recommendation?
Seven, Chair. In favour.
Any against?
4 against, Chair.
4 against. That's carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 9, potential future site visits. Who's going to tell us about this? Are you, Ian?
Yes, Sarah's not got the glamour job tonight, Chair. That's the first site, Chair. It's the former Rolls-Royce Works, Cotton Lane. It's a 60-unit scheme, apartments across a single building across 3 stories. Interestingly, it's got a fire safety strategy that Councillor Kerr was asking me about today by email. It's worth a look. Refers to the relevant British standard. Ravensdale Infant School. It's just a variation of condition, Chair, to amend the location of the sprinkler tank compound. So nothing much on that one. I dealt with an appeal at this site about 11 years ago for housing. It was allowed on appeal. They've since struggled to deliver any housing on there, mainly because of the juxtaposition of the railway line and the Flower World operation in the distribution centre. It's noisy. So this scheme is going to be very thoroughly looked at in terms of residential amenity issues, with this housing opposite and all around it. It's just the eastern relationship to the Flower World Centre. Manor Kingsway condition 12 variation to just up the number of completions before highway works are completed on the nearby highway. Councillor Kerr knows all about this one.
I'm not going to recommend a site visit because we'd probably go in the middle of the day when actually there's not much of a problem, but can I encourage people, if they happen to be driving along Kingsway the morning or afternoon, and just have a look and see what the queues of traffic and the parking is. We've got parking at the moment, but see what it looks like in terms of the queues and the difficulty of getting out of this site into the traffic at the moment. It's one of the complaints that we get from that area. When are they going to do something about that junction? We queue.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I was getting a bit worried and I thought you was going to say, well, don't go middle of the day, go middle of the night. Right?
145 Warbuck Road, it's currently a garage, covers most of the site, would be demolished to accommodate a block of properties, 8 flats over 3 stories. It's outlined with some matters applied for, layout, scale and access. Bit of a tight site. You can see it from the road. Yeah. DRI, they're lifting or wanting to increase the height of some of the buildings to get 124 more units in because they are very popular. So some are going from 4 to 5, 5 to 7 stories, so a couple of stories on various blocks. But you can see that all from various vantage points.
Sorry, I mean, it says various blocks, so do we have any indication which side it is, or?
The only thing I've got, Chair, are blocks E1, E2, E3 and E4, and I do apologise, I don't know whereabouts they are on the side.
It certainly doesn't help us.
But somewhere in that red edge.
Does anybody want to
It's
go
principally
there?
around the north, that north eastern corner, I think, where the height's going to be lifted.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
No takers anywhere at the moment, so.
You'll be familiar with this site. Pub was cleared some years ago. It's a single community building at the back of the plot, so on its western side. Across 3 floors. With a big swathe of car parking at the front. And that's it, thank you, Chair.